Welcome to the Global Citizenship Education interview series, where we engage visionary thinkers and transformative educators in conversations that matter. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Dr. Mary Abura, Dr. Nicki Gerstner, and Dr. Euna Lim to discuss their recent article published in Routledge, Taylor and Francis Journal of Higher Education Research and Development, titled Global Citizenship Education in Korean Higher Education, Moving Beyond Transformative Calls to Praxes. Nicki Gerstner is a postdoctoral fellow at Seoul National University of Education, Peace and Conflict Lab, and professor at Seoul Cyber University. Her research focuses on peace building, partnerships, and critical global citizenship education. Euna Lim is a PhD student at Seoul National University and investigates how global citizenship education can move beyond ideals towards inclusive, contextually grounded practice, bridging policy, and lived experience. Mary Abura is a lecturer at Hansung University and former researcher at Seoul National University. She works to decolonize higher education and advance social justice through equitable and empowering pedagogies. In their article, which we discuss today, the authors critically examine how global citizenship education is conceptualized and practiced in Korea's higher education institutions. Drawing on Nancy Fraser's influential framework of redistribution, recognition, and representation, the authors interrogate whether global citizenship education in Korea is fostering social justice or rather reinforcing neoliberal agendas. Their findings highlight a paradox. Universities are striving to cultivate socially conscious global citizens, and yet policy and practice often prioritize economic competitiveness and preparation of global workers. And so in this dialogue today, we'll explore those tensions and the implications for a more socially just, critical, and transformative global citizenship education. So Nicki, Euna, and Mary, very welcome to the Global Citizenship Education interview series. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
It is a real pleasure. I want to mention to our audience that this is a pioneeristic work we are doing today, where we are really trying to get you, as the authors of this very important article, to speak about the core highlights of your article, although usually we do so with book authors, but we felt at the Global Citizenship Education interview series that there is such a precious diversity and variety of academic peer-reviewed scientific articles out there that can contribute to the field of global citizenship education that was important for us to invite authors and to start this new line of work on examining peer-reviewed academic scientific articles. The first question I want to ask you is indeed related to your important work on global citizenship education in Korean higher education. So in your article, indeed, Global Citizenship Education in Korean higher education, moving beyond the transformative calls to praxis, you discuss global citizenship education in a context that promotes global citizenship education. And yet, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, there seems to be a paradox and a sort of a contradiction in terms. On the one hand, institutions aim to foster global citizens with critical perspectives. On the other, the global workers. So which one is it? And why did you choose this title for your paper?
First of all, Dr. Bosio, thank you for this invitation to join your podcast and the opportunity to share our research. You are such a leader in the field of GCE, and we are not only humbled, but we are also very grateful for this occasion to participate in a dialogue with you. In our article, we discuss how global citizenship education is viewed as a transformative force working towards social justice, or it's expected to, right? But instead, the paradox has been heavily critiqued for perpetuating neoliberal hegemonies and inequalities. So what are neoliberal hegemonies? These are the global workforce, the global markets, everybody being competitive to the point where Dr. Witt, my former advisor at UIUC, argues that the current conceptualization of GCE globally contributes to neocolonialism by teaching citizens of the wealthiest nations that their role is to be more competitive in the global marketplace. And this requires the maintenance of inequitable structures for the less and least wealthy nations. So global citizenship education may mean something slightly different to all of us. However, to me as an educator, GCE connects the local to the global, going beyond nationalities to become critical and responsible citizens within our global society, while having tangible impact within our local communities. In our case, this is South Korea. In your case, Japan. All over
And
the
the
world,
world.
this changes. This requires the skills and values in, through, and with education to work toward building a global culture of peace, in my mind. As you stated earlier in an interview in August, I don't know if you remember this, but you said that a big part of this is engaging in dialogue, like we are today on your podcast, not just amongst academics, but also being inclusive of government officials, policymakers, educators, students, and community members together. As UNESCO states, global citizenship education is more vital than ever as international solidarity and to inspire learners of all ages to positively contribute to their local and global communities. Regarding our title, Global Citizenship in Korean Higher Education, Moving Beyond Transformative Calls to Praxes, we chose this title as it concisely conveys the essence of our research, positionality, and contextualization. We are all researchers and academics. We're in the field, so we're mixing theory and practice together. As the article developed from a study group formed in our major, Global Education Cooperation at Seoul National University, we are all educators focusing on GCE. Euna is doing her PhD on this topic. Mary is focusing on international higher education or international student experiences in Korea. And I am focused on global local peace building through higher education partnerships. Also, I am currently teaching critical global citizenship at Seoul Cyber University as a required course. The context came naturally for us all, based in a prestigious Korean institution of higher education. So as we studied together, we realized that while in Korea has been advocating for GCE, or global citizenship education, but there was little research on the higher education sector. So as most research in the Korean context has been done in the K-12 education sector, this led us to question, how is higher education playing a role in this? How are they developing and implementing GCE to work towards social justice? Because that is the expectation that UNESCO and the UN have. So we question the call to transformation. And we wonder, is this done through praxis, so theory and practice, academics, or just theory or research or pedagogy, the way of teaching, right? And the expectation through global initiatives like the SDGs that higher education institutions prepare their students to become democratic and critical global citizens that work towards social justice in, through, and with their local and global connections? Or was this just a guise for global competition, or as the Koreans call it, global leadership? So we decided to look at the current literature, both in Korean and English, through a social justice lens to better understand whether GCE in Korean higher education institutions are working toward this social justice or not. After which we wanted to explore how could we move beyond this transformative call to actually embed it in our actions, in our practices, to continuously work toward this social justice, to guide students in becoming citizens of the world rather than just a global market commodity. I think Mary can give more details about the contextualization and Euna about the theoretical framework.
Korea offers a very interesting and distinct case in which GCE is simultaneously a national policy priority and also a site of persistent tension between neoliberal market goals and social justice aspirations. So to start, I think one needs to understand Korea's GCE historical context. Since the 1990s, Korean government framed GCE as a tool for economic competitiveness, positioning students as global workers rather than socially responsible citizens. Yet, after 2012's launch of the Global Education First initiative, this is also known by the acronym GEFI, and the incorporation of the UN SDG 4.7 targets, Korean institutions then began to claim a transformative agenda for GCE. So this paradox, we have on the one hand, a policy rhetoric that stresses socially conscious global citizens, yet on the other hand, practice remains dominated by market-orientated agendas. So this reveals a clear research gap, which seeded the need to assess whether Korean universities are actually fostering the redistribution, recognition, and representation dimensions of social justice, which is our theoretical framework. We are using Nancy Fraser's redistribution, recognition, and representation. We are calling it the 3R framework. Furthermore, Korea's rapid expansion of GCE programs, the involvement of UNESCO APSEU, APSEU stands for Asia Pacific Center for Education for International Understanding, and the Korean National Commission for UNESCO, as well as documented critiques of neoliberal, meritocratic, and colonial legacies make it ideal, a very ideal context for examining how GCE can move from transformative calls to a more concrete democratic praxis.
It's very interesting. And I think you mentioned Nancy Fraser redistribution, recognition, and representation. So I want to ask a follow-up question on that. And of course, you or Nicki or Euna are free to address this. The question is that since you decided in your paper to use Nancy Fraser redistribution, recognition, and representation, I believe it would be interesting for our audience to learn why you decided to apply that framework, particularly in your discussion on global citizenship education, particularly and specifically in the Korean context in higher education.
So thanks for bringing up these questions. We use Fraser's 3Rs frameworks because it provides a powerful lens to uncover how structural inequalities, such as economic, cultural, and political injustices, shape students' access, recognition, and participation within GCE in higher education. So, for those who are new to these Nancy frameworks, I would like to share a little bit more about it. So, redistribution is about economic justice. So it ensures that all students have equitable access to learning opportunities as well as resources. So it allows to ask who gets access and who is limited by the existing structure. So we saw in our study a clear effort towards extending access in GCE programs like the Blue Letter Project, as well as the Global Korea Scholarship, which supports underprivileged or international students to study abroad or in Korea. So through redistribution in GCE means not just expanding access, but also enabling students to share and shape knowledge, which leads me to the second part, and it's recognition. It's about cultural justice. It values diverse identities and challenges the hierarchies often embedded in curricula and pedagogy. So it prompts us to ask whose knowledge and experiences are being recognized or ignored. So, for instance, some international students in the Global Career Scholarships, especially those from developing countries, face subtle bias and stereotyping, which is a clear case of interest recognition. So true recognition then means not just acknowledging diversity, but also seeing students' cultural identities as well as experiences as integral to the learning process. So the last one will be representation, and it's about political justice. It ensures that all students have an equal voice and opportunity to participate in learning as well as decision making. So it pushes us to ask who gets to speak and shape the learning experience. And a good example we found was in the World and Citizens course at Changi University, where the professor redesigned evaluations after hearing the students' comment to reflect their diverse experience. So allowing both Koreans as well as international students to participate and be evaluated more equitably. So through representation in GCE means not just inviting participation, but also ensuring that every student's voice can shape the learning experience. So overall, Fraser's 3 Rs help us understand GCE not just as a set of global ideals, but also as a lead practice, and one that calls for equitable access, genuine recognition of diversity, and also meaningful participation so that all learners can engage as equal partners in shaping a more socially just GCE. Thank you.
So, in your research, you describe the tension between preparing global workers and global citizens. So, how this tension manifests in Korea, I believe this is very important, as I mentioned to our audience at the very beginning of our conversation, because there is often confusion about the purposes of a global citizenship education, whether it is to educate the global worker, human resources, basically students who are job ready, ready for the international job market, or indeed, as myself, you and other colleagues, Carlos Alberto Torres, Yusuf Agdid, Anne Shuttle, who is also based in South Korea, would advocate is preparing critically and ethically oriented and responsible global citizens. I believe this tension needs to be addressed because, as you know, global citizenship education can be interpreted from a variety of theoretical orientations, including indeed the neoliberal, a bit more transformative, critical, ethical, value creating, values based, moral. So we have a lot of theoretical orientations. What do you think about this tension, the global worker and the global citizen?
Dr. Bosio, thank you for your question. You're very right in saying that these tensions need to be named, and they also need to be addressed. So in Korea, how these tensions appear is because Korean universities are actually pulled in two opposite directions. Previously, I mentioned this. It goes by the acronym GEFI initiative. So they present GCE as a way to nurture global citizens who act responsibly towards human rights, equality, and social justice. At the same time, the dominant neoliberal logic treats graduates as global workers whose primary value is marketability and economic competitiveness. This duality is also evident in the language used by officials who describe students as marketable commodities rather than civic actors. So, to add, studies in Korean programs illustrate how global worker models, they reproduce inequalities. So we have, for instance, the Global Korea Scholarship. This is also known as the GKS Scholarship. This frames international students as revenue sources and university ranking boosters. This reinforces misrecognition and misrepresentation of marginalized groups. Similarly, the World Friends Career Volunteer Scheme, though it's praised as socially just, it still positions Korean participants as helpers and the other oversees recipients as unfortunate others, revealing a persistent hierarchical view. Similarly, so actually, simply put, in Korea, GCE is more about giving development aid. The funding programs seemingly have undertones of being a privileged helper. These practices limit redistribution of resources. They fail to recognize cultural diversity, and they exclude student voices from governance, thereby preventing GCE from achieving the full 3R justice that Nancy Fraser outlines. The result is a policy practice gap where the aspirations produce socially responsible global citizens. It's undermined by a systemic focus on producing globally competitive workers. And that's essentially what the tension is in the Korean context.
Yeah, and I believe this is a reflection of the political situation that we are facing nowadays, this strong dominance of neoliberalism versus progressive ideals. Unfortunately, is reflected where there is this extreme focus on fostering the global worker and preparing students for the international job market. Important as it is, we can't completely forget that. And I think students need to be prepared for the international job market. The problem is that, as I mentioned in this at the beginning of our conversation, speaking to an excellent and very motivated group of students yesterday in Indonesia, the problem is that when dialogue about ethical values, social justice values is missing altogether, then we see that reflected in our leadership, right? These dialogues we are having here together are very important in the microcosm of global citizenship education. And if we don't change, then and our leadership doesn't change, then I think we are in big troubles. This is a very interesting conversation. We discussed framing the concept of global citizenship education, specifically in the Korean higher education context, the meaning of moving beyond transformative calls to praxis. We also discussed the contextual focus of your interesting paper. We touched on Nancy Fraser, redistribution, recognition, and representation, tension between the global worker and the global citizen. Now there is time for a challenging question, I must say, that all our guests, international guests, will get at the end of this dialogue. And the question is, if you had to define global citizenship education in just 3 keywords, what would they be and why?
Well,
First of all, did you prepare individually a set of 3 responses, or it's a team job? Wonderful. Wonderful.
I'd like to go first, and then Nicki is going to chime in as well.
Okay.
So for me, I settled on the acronym CJR. So C would be for criticality. So GCE would require learners to develop critical literacy that marks the use of language tools to exercise power, to enhance their life experience, and to question sources of privilege and injustice. There needs to be a critical engagement with power structures and questioning the power structures as well. The overarching goal of GCE is to promote human rights, social justice, and equality for all members of the global community. And finally, R for representation. So following Nancy Fraser's framework, genuine GCE must enable students to participate in decision-making and to have a voice in governance, embodying the representation dimension, as well as the political injustices that take place. These 3 words capture the essential practice of GCE, a critical stance towards existing inequities, a commitment to social justice outcomes, and the empowerment of the learners to have their voices heard in shaping the societies that they live in. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Nicki Gerstner.
Thank you, Mary. I think we all echo each other in our answers of this question. This question was very hard and difficult to come up with 3 words. But it's not that simple when you're trying to capture a world or a global citizenship. What does this mean? For me, that means being awareness of injustices and continued marginalizations of certain peoples and populations. And then also criticality in your thinking, in your literacy, in your dialogues, not only to question what needs to be done, but to empower action and positive change. So it's one thing to be aware, and it's one thing to be critical, but how do we move past these thought processes, right? And how do we move just past dialogues? Like, yes, dialogues are very important in understanding, but once we understand, how do we then create action for these dialogues and these criticalities? And for me, that is value. So working toward a culture of peace, a world that is open to dialogue, nonviolent conflict resolution, fostering understanding and building skills that support working towards social justice. And with that, I would like to also cover Euna's part. She said that she was really inspired by the 3 R's of Fraser. So for her, the 3 words were realize, reflect, and respond. And I think this echoes both my response and Mary's as well, in realizing, because GCE helped her realize how deeply connected we are. And it has also made her aware of the privileges and inequalities that shape the world we live in. In this sense, GCE to Euna is about realizing what we do locally can affect others globally and vice versa. So we're all interconnected. So realizing and being aware, reflecting. Through GCE, we have all learned to reflect more upon our everyday choices and actions. She believes that GCE provides the space to critically reflect on who we are in this interconnected world. So without self-reflection, we cannot have action, right? If we don't understand our place in this structure and in this world, we can't change it. And then respond, because GCE means nothing but just realizing and reflecting. That's not what it means, right? It means that individuals should respond to the social issues, societal issues that matter to them, whether it be by participating in community services or engaging in decision-making processes that promote social justice. We cannot just have awareness and criticality, but we also have to have action. So for Euna, GCE is really about living with awareness, reflecting with humility, and responding with care to help build a more just and compassionate world. And I think that's what our article really tries to
emphasize and
Yeah.
capture. Thank you very much. A very interesting conversation with Mary, Nicki, and Euna about their important work in the Routledge, Taylor and Francis Journal of Higher Education Research and Development by the title Global Citizenship Education in Korean Higher Education, Moving Beyond Transformative Calls to Praxes. This was a very interesting conversation, and keep going with your important work. It was a real pleasure to listen to your perspectives in the Global Citizenship Education interview series. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
Dr.
us.
Bosio.